In December 1900, the seas off Scotland's western coast were dark and wild, almost like a scene from a movie. The Flannan Isles, a tiny and isolated cluster of rocky outcrops, stood about 20 miles west of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Picture this: winds so fierce they could literally blow a person off the cliffs, and waves crashing with such force that they could swallow a ship whole. It was a harsh place to live, yet 3 brave men called it home. These lighthouse keepers had one crucial job: to keep the great lamp of the Flannan Isles lighthouse shining bright, guiding sailors away from the treacherous rocks below. Their names were Thomas Marshall, the second assistant James Duckett, the principal keeper, and Donald MacArthur, the occasional stand-in who was just there for this rotation. These guys were seasoned pros, used to the dull routine, the dangers lurking around, and the strict discipline required in such a remote spot. But come Christmas that year, all 3 of them mysteriously vanished, leaving behind a scene that would puzzle investigators for over a century. Can you imagine the eerie silence that must have hung over that lighthouse? What could have possibly happened to them? The Flannan Isles Lighthouse had been built only the previous year, in 1899. It was state-of-the-art for its time, standing 75 feet high, with living quarters built into its base. The men worked on a schedule of weeks-long rotations, one team stationed at the lighthouse while another stayed ashore on Lewis. Their duties were relentless cleaning lenses, maintaining machinery, logging weather reports, and signaling passing ships. The light itself, visible for over 20 miles, was a lifeline for sailors navigating the wild Atlantic waters. On December 15, 1900, the steamer Arctur, en route from Philadelphia to Leith, passed near the Flannan Isles. The captain, noting his position, expected to see the beam from the lighthouse. But the night sky was dark. No light. He made a note in his log, but assumed the lamp had malfunctioned. Several days later, another ship also reported the same. Still, the Northern Lighthouse Board, the agency responsible for the light, wasn't immediately alarmed. Bad weather often interfered with operations, and the Flannans were notoriously difficult to reach during winter. By December 26th, when the relief ship Hesperus finally set sail to deliver supplies and rotate the crew, the storm had subsided. Captain James Harvey commanded the vessel, accompanied by Joseph Moore, the next keeper scheduled to replace one of the men. As the island came into view, something felt off immediately. Normally, one of the keepers would be waiting at the landing to greet them, waving from the narrow stone steps. That day, no one stood there. The flag, usually flying above the lighthouse, was missing. The air itself felt still. Harvey sounded the ship's whistle once, twice, 3 times. No reply. Moore, uneasy, took a small boat and rowed ashore. The landing platform was slippery and cold. He climbed the steep, carved steps up the cliff, calling out for his comrades. Still nothing. When he reached the lighthouse door, he found it locked. He forced it open. Inside, the clock had stopped. 2 of the 3 oilskins, the heavy coats used for protection during storms, were missing from their hooks. The 3rd still hung neatly. On the table sat half-eaten food, a chair knocked over, and the kitchen clock frozen at 9:08. The beds were unmade. Moore felt a heaviness in his chest. He searched every room, shouting their names: Duckett, Marshall, MacArthur, but heard only the sound of the wind through the stone tower. He climbed the spiral staircase to the light chamber. The lamp was spotless, freshly polished, but cold. It hadn't been lit in days. Returning to the cliffside, he scanned the sea. Nothing but dark water and endless waves. He returned to the Hesperus and told Captain Harvey what he'd found. Harvey ordered a signal to be sent to the mainland. A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan. The 3 keepers have disappeared. In the following days, a full investigation began. The Northern Lighthouse Board sent Superintendent Robert Muirhead, who had known all 3 men personally. When he arrived, he examined their last log entries. What he read deepened the mystery. On December 12th, Marshall had written of severe winds the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. He noted that Duckett had been very quiet and MacArthur had been crying, odd behavior for such a hardened man. The next day's entry described continued storms and that the men had prayed together, something not required by their duty. The final entry, dated December 15th, read simply, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. After that, silence." But here was the strange thing. Local weather reports from that period indicated there hadn't been a major storm in the region on the 12th, 13th, or 14th. The seas had been rough, but not catastrophic. Whatever storm Marshall had recorded, it didn't seem to match the data. Muirhead then turned his attention to the West Landing, the area most exposed to the sea. There, he discovered something odd. The iron railings had been twisted and bent, as if by immense force. A life buoy had been ripped from its holder. Rocks, weighing several hundred pounds, had been displaced high up on the cliff far beyond the reach of normal waves. It looked as though the ocean itself had climbed the island. The working theory became that the men had gone to secure equipment during a storm. Perhaps the winds had pulled one into the sea, and the others had tried to rescue him, only to be swept away themselves. But certain details didn't fit. Why had one coat been left behind? Why had the log described a storm before it existed? And if they were blown off the island, where were their bodies? The currents around the Flannans were unpredictable, but search teams scoured nearby shores for weeks, finding nothing. Rumors started to bloom. The island, after all, had long carried a reputation for the uncanny. Locals called it Eileanmore, the Big Isle, but few dared set foot there. Old stories told of strange voices on the wind, ghostly figures moving along the cliffs, and invisible hands that could snuff out lanterns. The island even had an ancient stone chapel, built centuries earlier by St. Flannan himself, said to be haunted by monks who had vanished there. For superstitious sailors, the disappearance of the keepers was less an accident and more a fulfillment of a curse. But the human mind prefers reason to myth, so Muirhead kept searching for rational explanations. He noticed that the ropes used to secure the landing equipment were frayed, suggesting recent strain. It seemed likely that Marshall and Duckett had gone out to the West Landing to check on the crane used to hoist supplies from boats. Perhaps MacArthur had stayed behind at first, inside the lighthouse. Then, realizing his friends were in trouble, he may have rushed out, leaving his coat hanging to help them. A single rogue wave could have struck at that moment, powerful enough to drag all three into the ocean. Yet even that didn't account for the logs. The eerie emotional tone, the prayer, the crying, the calm after felt too human, too haunted. What had they seen? What had they felt, alone on that rock, cut off from the world? Years passed, and the mystery settled into legend. Some claimed to have seen strange lights moving around the lighthouse in the nights following their disappearance. Others swore that at certain times the lamp still flickered faintly even when no one was stationed there. The new keepers assigned afterward were uneasy. One refused to sleep in the quarters alone. In later decades, wave simulations were run to test whether such a freak wave could reach the West Landing. The findings were astonishing. Under rare conditions, waves up to 200 feet high could indeed strike the island, capable of twisting metal and hurling debris onto the cliffs. It gave weight to the accident theory, but didn't explain the timing, or the state of the logbook, or the feeling described by every man who visited after that the place itself watched them. The lighthouse at Flannan Isles is now fully automated, which means no keepers live there anymore. It's kind of eerie, right? The machinery hums away silently, and that bright beam still slices through the fog. But there are no human hands to tend to it. The building looks almost exactly as it did back in 1900, same narrow stairs that creak underfoot, those heavy doors that feel like they have stories to tell, and the old dining table where meals were once shared. Visitors lucky enough to step inside often say the air feels heavy, almost like something still lingers there, you know? And that old wall clock, it's stuck forever at 9:08, a haunting reminder of the mystery that surrounds this place. What do you think happened to the keepers? It's such a captivating story. No bodies were ever recovered, and not a single personal effect washed ashore. It's as if the three men just stepped into the storm and vanished without a trace. Some folks say the sea took them, while others think madness might have played a role. But then there are those who whisper that the island itself claimed them, feeling jealous of the light they brought to its dark shores. Isn't that eerie? It's like something out of a ghost story. More than a century later, sailors still can't help but glance toward the Flannan Isles as they pass by, feeling a chill run down their spines. It's eerie, right? They say that on certain nights, when the wind howls just right and the waves crash fiercely against the rocks, you can hear three faint voices drifting over the water calling out to each other's names: Duckett, Marshall, MacArthur. It's like they're trapped in time, forever echoing in the darkness. And beneath it all, there's this low, mechanical heartbeat of the lamp still turning, still watching, still alone, keeping vigil over the desolate landscape. It's haunting to think that even after all these years, the mystery of those men lingers, capturing the imagination of anyone who dares to sail nearby. What do you think? Isn't it wild how stories like this keep our curiosity alive?